You gotta stay consistent, they said. You have to be consistent. Everyone says you have to be consistent. Even if you miss one upload, YouTube is never going to suggest your content to another person ever again, and you're never going to get another subscriber, not even one. You can't even miss 1 week. Consistent, consistent, consistent. That's the wrong kind of consistency. Stay tuned. What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Track Tips. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about consistency. As you know, consistency is a huge, if not the biggest influencing factor to success in bracket racing. I'm going to provide tips for both what you can do kind of to your car to increase your consistency, as well as things you can do as a driver to increase consistency. Although some of the tips will kind of branch across both of those categories, I'll do my best to try and keep some sort of structure to this and minimize the ramblage. If you kind of want to see a bulleted list of the tips, definitely check out the description down below. I'll leave all kinds of notes down below. Hopefully you guys can get some value out of that as well. So first off, let's talk about some of the things that I have learned or have noticed through the years about what actually makes a consistent bracket car. Maybe you're just building a brand new bracket car, or you already have a car and there's some way that you can maybe incorporate some of these things into your race car and maybe up your consistency just a little bit. The first thing you need to think about is, where is the actual source of most inconsistency in a drag race? It's the starting line. Getting your car to hook up to the track and get a consistent launch off of the starting line is extremely critical to resulting in a consistent elapsed time down the track. The easiest way that I see to hook a car up consistently is, of course, to make sure you have enough tire on the car. The more tire you can fit under the car, the better. You're going to have more surface area against the track surface, which of course is going to result in a more consistent 60 foot. A more consistent 60 foot is going to tend to provide a more consistent elapsed time, of course. Another thing that you can do is have your car scaled, and maybe you'll find that you need to move some weight from side to side possibly. You want to make sure that your car is hitting both rear tires equally and that your car isn't like twisting up or trying to drive sideways or anything like that at the starting line. That's all just another source of inconsistency, and you don't want that. Suspension and tire setup is very, very critical to having consistent car, but like I mentioned before, having a big tire on the back of your car is definitely the easiest place to start. Another thing that typically makes up a consistent drag car would be that lighter cars are a little bit more consistent than heavier cars. Lighter cars are quicker too, so it's kind of like a win-win at the racetrack. Any changes to air conditions, track conditions, fluid temperature conditions, they're all magnified with a heavier car. The more weight that you're trying to move off of the starting line, the more chance of inconsistency. Another thing to consider is wheelbase. Longer cars tend to make better race cars. A shorter wheelbase car is oftentimes going to end up doing some crazy wheelies, and it might go this way, that way, sideways, and the other thing, and that's all just another source of inconsistency. So take like a dragster, for example. It's a purpose-built repeating drag racing machine. It's a long wheelbase and they don't do any wheelies. They're not designed to do wheelies at all. 100% of the power is being used to transfer the car forwards and not up. So definitely consider that when you're building or selecting your next bracket race car. You definitely want to consider that a longer wheelbase is going to be a little bit better and a little bit more consistent than a shorter wheelbase car. Moving on, the transmission and converter are very, very critical components to building a consistent race car. Loose converters are generally much more consistent than tight converters. A looser converter is going to keep your engine in that optimum performing RPM range for a higher percentage of your pass. The trade-off is that a tighter converter, of course, is going to yield more mile per hour on the big end, but looser converters are almost always more consistent. This really comes down to providing the right information to whoever is building your converter in the first place, but just know that if you're maybe having consistency issues or something like that, maybe your converter is a little bit too tight, and it's important to know that a looser converter is generally much more consistent on the racetrack than a tighter converter. Rev limiters or RPM limiters are also very important for consistency. I mentioned earlier that the starting line is the source of most inconsistency in a drag race, so rev limiters can be very, very valuable tools for staging your car and also for launching your car at the exact same RPM every single time. You want to try and take as much of the human error out of a drag race as you possibly can. So incorporate a rev limiter into your car so that you can make sure you're launching your car at the exact same RPM every single time. You're going to have much more consistent 60 foots, much more consistent results down the track. The last thing that I would recommend when building your killer consistent bracket racing car would be to incorporate some sort of an electric or air actuated shifter. Like I said, you want to take all of the human error out of as much of this as you can, so having the car shift itself at the exact same time or exact same RPM every single pass is going to be optimum as far as consistency goes. This is huge. I think this is the last one that I'm listing car-wise here, but I think it's probably the most important one. There's a lot of other little things too. When you're shifting your car, you're having all of this human error as far as reaching down and shifting the car and potentially like doing it at a different time, but you're also taking your hands off the wheels. You could wiggle the wheel. There's a lot of inconsistency that could happen from doing that, and putting an air shifter in there is just pretty slick, and it's really, really a good thing to help increase your consistency at the racetrack. All right, now let's move on to some things you can do as a driver to actually help increase your consistency. First up is maintaining consistent fluid temperatures throughout the day. This is super critical, and most critical is probably your transmission fluid temperature. You definitely want to make sure that you're using a temperature stable transmission fluid. I don't really understand the inner workings of a torque converter that well. I know there's like some fins and fluid and some sort of voodoo wizardry that happens in there. It's basically just a fluid coupling between your engine and your transmission that's transferring the power between the two. It's extremely critical that the fluid inside of that torque converter remains a very consistent viscosity, otherwise you're going to get all kinds of inconsistent results head into your transmission and ultimately on the racetrack. So the tip here is really to use temperature stable transmission fluid and to keep a close eye on your transmission temperatures throughout the day. Even after you've reached the starting line and you've maintained your transmission temperature and everything looks good, you want to be consistent from that point forward as well. Make sure you're doing a consistent burnout, because if you're doing a longer burnout from one pass to the next, then all kinds of more heat's going to be in your transmission. You want to be consistent in your burnout and your staging procedure, and definitely be consistent with how long you're on the converter on the starting line. So if you have that car floor and you're ready to launch and you're on there for just like maybe an extra second, that could drastically change the temperature of your converter, and of course fluid viscosity, and of course consistency of your car. So just make sure you're doing as much of these things as consistent as you can as a driver. Watching your temperatures, doing your burnout, staging your car. Your whole starting line procedure needs to be extremely consistent, the same every single time, so that your car can ultimately have the exact same, or very, very as close as possible, the same temperature pass after pass. The last set of tips I have here are really just driver consistency. Even when you're staging the car, you want to be very, very careful, and I've mentioned this in a couple other videos, but you want to be very, very careful on the starting line. Staging your car even just a couple inches deeper than you did last time could drastically change your 60-foot times, and of course, your elapsed time down the track. Also pay attention to where you're staging side to side. You want to make sure that you do everything consistent, and then when you're driving down the track, you want to keep that car dead center in the middle of the groove, and make sure you're driving it exactly straight and doing everything consistent, and you're in the same spot on the track every single time. It may sound minor, but we're talking about cars that can literally repeat to the thousandth of a second pass after pass. That's what everybody else is doing, and that's what your competition is doing. So this might sound minor, but you need to really pay attention to how you're driving the car and making sure that you're doing it exactly the same every single time. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap up this episode of Track Tips, but before you go, let me know down below, what do you guys do at the racetrack in regards to consistency? Maybe I missed something, or maybe you learned something new today. Either way, I would love to hear from you guys down below in the comment section. As always, thank you guys so much for the support. Keep turning them win lights on. I'll see you guys in the next one. Later. Been been trying to get this camera really close to the side because I want to show off this awesome, can you see that? This is this awesome new case. I've been really wanting to get this into a video. Check out this case I got for the World Championship ring. It's pretty awesome. Love that thing.